The sun has gone down at Hangman's Hill, and the ghost at Misery Corner isn't walking tonight. So, welcome to the Weird Tales Radio Show, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic and folklore. And now, here's your host, writer, award-winning journalist, best-selling author, and sometime werewolf hunter, Charles Christian.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Weird Tales Radio Show. I'm your host, Charles Christian, and our big story in this episode is when I took myself off to a local Comic Con and interviewed the stars of some of the biggest TV and movie franchises in recent years. Yes, we're talking Game of Thrones, Doctor Who, and Harry Potter. All that later. But first, we're going to speak to one of our regular contributors. That's Naomi of Inanna's Magical Gifts here in nearby Norwich. And she's going to be talking to us about Litha. That's the pagan Wiccan celebration of Midsummer's Day and Midsummer's Eve. On with the show. And once again, it's my pleasure to be talking to Naomi of Inanna's Magical Gifts here in Norwich. And we're going to have a little talk about Litha, which is the Wiccan stroke pagan festival surrounding Midsummer. Over to you, Naomi.
Hello again, Charles, and thank you for allowing me an opportunity to talk about this key festival. Yes, Litha. I was very intrigued by this word, Litha. Many witches and other pagans do seem to use it as meaning that shift at summer solstice, that pinnacle of sun's power and potency, representing the longest day of the year and the shortest night. It's actually not that easy to find out where that word actually comes from, but I have been reliably informed that it has Anglo-Saxon origin and came from words meaning navigable and gentle. And I haven't seen that written in most books that I've looked at, but I like the idea that it is about navigable and gentle states of being. I think the way I see summer solstice, and of course it is a moment, a measurable calendrical moment of saying this is the longest day, that the sun is in this position over the equator, that we are in the northern hemisphere tilted towards the sun, and this is the longest day that we will have. But it is also, I think, a feeling and a shift in the season. And I think it, like navigation, we can be moving towards it and we can be moving away from it, but we can also just sort of be at it in a state of summer solsticeness. And even though today, as we speak, it's been cold and wet and gusty and rainy and stormy, that is also part of it. That summer is about heat and intensity and fire and activity and growth and ripening, but it is also about stillness and appreciating what we're seeing of the season and quiet, dusk, twilight, bird song at dawn. I've just been stood outside listening to that beautiful ripple of blackbird song, one of my favorite bird songs. And so I think it's a hinge. It's like a doorway again that we kind of move through, that we approach it with energy and gusto and drive and action, but we also, as we move past it, think about where we're at, what we're doing, and the way our goals and creative efforts might be shifting and changing. So there can also be lots of water as well as fire. So that idea as well. Somebody in the shop said to me only this week, as they were looking through summer solstice cards and sun-themed jewellery and candles and things with bees and leaves on that we have. And they said that they saw summer solstice as being an entirely depressing festival because it meant that from that moment the nights began to draw in and we were on the way to winter again and cold and dark and misery. And I thought, yeah, but we're about the furthest away from that we can be. And we had a little chat about it. And he said, well, I think you must be, an optimist, and I'm a pessimist. I said, no, I'm a pragmatist, I'm a realist. We face all of these things. We face the jollity and the sadness. We face the easiness of things and the difficulty of things. And I think summer solstice is a point where, perhaps looking again at that Anglo-Saxon origin, gentle, it is a time when I think we have to be gentle with ourselves as well. There are times when we can push on and go for it, and other times when we just want to sit still and perhaps just appreciate what we see around us and think about how our lives are moving through the year and where we're at with our own personal things as well as things going on around us. Issues of the day, many and varied. Again, talking to somebody this week about plastic and how much we have in our homes that we might only use once, and then what do we do with it? These are points where we can consider. I think that's the other side of summer solstice. But yes, many lovely things that we can make that are sun and sun-shaped, sun-coloured, drying slices of oranges and hanging them up, making beautiful dishes with yellow fruits and yellow vegetables, salads with tomatoes that are yellow and yellow courgettes, and maybe a turmeric and yogurt dressing, a golden dressing, or creating things that are seasoned and spiced to our liking, or with a fresh lemonade with some nice honey or agave syrup in it, and make our own and enjoy the colours and the glory of the flowers around us, and watching the industry of bees and other insects and making room and space in our gardens for them. But also this idea, yes, it's turning. The year is already halfway through its solar cycle, and that does mean we're going to see the evenings start to draw in, but hopefully with more warmth and more ripening and a harvest yet to come and achievements that we can be pleased with and proud of. And yes, there is this thought that we're moving away from that intensity as we move through July and August, but hopefully still some glorious goldenness to enjoy before the autumn and the harvest.
I think it's also fair to say that the period we're entering now through to August Eve, Lammas, Lunasa, whatever you want to call it, is actually the height of the summer in terms of, historically, these are the warmest days now approaching. Yeah.
So we're really just getting into gear with it, yes. But yes, if you're looking at the mathematics of lengths of days and nights, yes, they will begin to shorten a few minutes each 24-hour span. But I think, as you say, the intensity of heat and the richness of summer and the focus of our lives as we plan our summer holidays. We don't do them in June, we do them in July, end of, and August, and even into September. Those, I would say, are the most golden of the months. But now is the point where we first perhaps become particularly aware of it. And I think, magically speaking, there is that shift and turn, as the old tales focus on that idea of the sun wheel being passed between the Oak King and the Holly King. Mm-hmm. So now the Oak King gives it back to the Holly King, and we do move, yes, towards winter, but we're as far away from it right now as it's possible to be. Mm-hmm. It's still got plenty of turns to go, but I think that idea of navigation and of gentleness. I think those are two interesting aspects of the word Litha, and it seems to have various meanings even in other languages. It comes up as a word in Xhosa and in Sri Lankan, and it has associations of richness and shiningness and illumination, but certainly for us, observing as we are in the northern hemisphere, this extreme of light, that is certainly, even though it's cloudy and grey today, the evening is still light, long, lovely twilights, and soon my garden will be filled with hedgehogs coming to feed for their nightly supper, and walking around it in the morning before I get into the shop. It's lovely to see all the flowers open and the greenness of everything. So for that, we need both sun and water. So those elements are the key. And a balance, we hope, between the two, not too much. We don't want either drought or flooding. But it is a time of extremes, and we know now, we're going through extremes of weather and climate change. But I think for us in our magical and our psychological journey, we can think of those ideas as we're navigating our way through, and to remember to be gentle with ourselves as well.
Just two other little pointers. Midsummer this year, because obviously it's a solar-related an event rather than a purely fixed on the calendar one. It's on Saturday the 21st, isn't it?
Yes, it's usually either the 20th or the 21st, depending on the year. Same with the winter solstice. There seems to be, the way that it works for us is that it's on one or other of those 2 days. And obviously there is a precise moment when one could say that is the moment of solstitial being, that the sun is apparently, in our eyes, as we see it, not moving, the stis bit of the solstice word. So yes, it is that point on the 21st this year. But whether if one is celebrating, you could choose the nearest hot day that you wanted and focus on that day, or the nearest point that I think, I do say to people, if they say, oh, I'm going to miss it, I say, no, you're not, because you're alive and you're here, so you haven't missed it. And if there's a point at which you want to create a little ceremony for yourself, a little celebration to honour the changes you've been working through since the spring and ideas that you want to focus on through the rest of the summer, choose your time to work for you. It isn't something that you've missed, but it's when you can pay attention to it. And if it's a day or so either side, I don't think the goddesses and the gods will mind.
Just one very final point. I've seen some people saying that if you have crystals and gemstones, you should leave them out in the sun to recharge them over the solstice. What are the stones associated with the summer solstice?
Well, I'd say a couple of things. One, anything that you leave in the sun that can refract light has a risk of creating fire, which is why we never put things like crystal balls in the shop window, because if they are in sun, they can heat up and do just like a magnifying glass and create fire. So I would say be aware that depending on the polish and the refraction within a stone, that it may get very hot, and it could either scorch it or crack it or ignite something around it. So do just be aware of that if you're leaving things in full sunlight. But I would say any golden-coloured stone you could utilize. You could give it a refresh simply by holding it in your hands in sunlight for a few minutes, and then bringing it back in again. It will have taken on and taken in that solar power energy. So I would say anything from a golden citrine to a golden quartz, a golden calcite, a beautiful sparkling piece of fool's gold, iron pyrite. You could use as a representation of gold and richness, but certainly there are many lovely yellow and orangey coloured stones. You might find something like even a fire opal, which as you turn it will have a lovely illuminated spark and flash of orangey golden light within it. But certainly any of the stones that are yellow and golden colours. I have some favourite quartzes that I like to wear at this time of year, but I even have things like yellow-coloured pearls and stones that are, with an iridescence on them I quite like at this time of year as well. I know some people might associate pearl with moon, but if it's an orangey yellow-coloured pearl, then you could see it in a more solar way. Obviously, there are lots of lovely herbs and flowers that one could look at, everything from very humble dandelions to more fancy flowers, but obviously buttercups and daisies and all the wildflowers are key. Marigolds, nasturtiums, yellow roses. You could make a most wonderful decorative collection. There are lots of edible flowers as well. You can dip dandelion flowers and courgette flowers, which are an amazing yellow, in a bit of flour and beaten egg and make little fritters of them. Some things like nasturtiums can be sprinkled on top of salads and eaten just as they are. And obviously we're looking at all the produce that we have, especially if it's local sourced, and enjoying all of that. But creating something that is a golden-themed, fire-themed, with a little bit of water, perhaps here and there, celebration for oneself is a lovely thing to do at this time of year.
That's brilliant. Naomi, thank you ever so much, and we'll be talking to you again.
My very great pleasure, Charles. Thank you. And I shall look forward to our next chat.
Something wicked this way comes. Weird Harvest Press presents Harvest Hymns, the sweet fruits and twisted roots of folk horror. A 2-volume set of books investigating the music of folk horror, featuring contributions from some of the biggest names in the field. Candia McCormack, Johnny Trunk, Maddie Pryor, Sharon Krause, Jim Jupp and Kemper Norton, to name just a few. Available now via lulu.com. 100% of all Weird Harvest Press profits are donated to wildlife charities.
Welcome, fool. You have come of your own free will to the appointed place. It is time to keep your appointment with the Wicker Man.
A couple of weeks ago, I took myself off to the Great Yarmouth Comic Con in Great Yarmouth, as the name may imply, and took the opportunity to interview some of the guests there, actors who are in some of the biggest movie and TV franchises of recent years. I spoke to Clive Russell, Game of Thrones, Thor: The Dark World, Ripper Street and Wolfman. I also spoke to Chris Rankin, best known for playing Percy Weasley in the Harry Potter franchise. And finally, I spoke to Ross Mullan, Game of Thrones, Clash of the Titans, Doctor Who, and one of the Sharknado movies. And I'm here talking to Clive Russell. Clive, you're probably best known in recent years for your role in Game of Thrones, but you've got a spectacular list of credits over the years. Everything from... I think you're doing a Dracula miniseries at the moment.
I am. I just finished doing it last week.
Yeah.
Which is written by the guys who wrote Cumberbatch's Sherlock.
Right.
It's very cleverly written. Very good.
Right.
I was in an episode where... Actually, I'm not supposed to be talking about this. So, anyway, it's very good, but I can't talk about it.
Right. But I mean, I'm just looking through. You were in 13th Warrior?
Yeah, what was it, John McTiernan movie?
Yeah, it's one.
Where I was the fourth tallest of 12 Vikings, with Antonio Banderas as a young Arab who came to join us on a quest to get rid of the Vendel, who were kind of...
Yeah.
It's slightly a horror story.
Yeah.
It was great fun to do.
Yeah, no, it's one of my favourite movies of that type. But I mean...
It should have come out now, I think, or in the last 3 years it would have done much better.
Yes.
Because in a sense it plays right into the Game of Thrones kind of stuff. And it just went straight to video.
Yeah.
And it was something like $120 million to make the movie and promote it.
Yeah.
And they just go, oh fine, it doesn't work, let's make something else.
Yeah.
As the Americans do.
Yeah, yes, I think you're right on that, because it's early 90s or something.
22 years ago, 1997, we made it.
Yeah. And
it disappeared by the end of 1998. But a fantastic thing to do.
But I mean, looking at all the other things you got there, you've done the likes of Coronation Street, Holby City, Hollyoaks, The Bill.
Yeah.
What's the sort of secret of your success? Because I mean, you know, we think of you as a character actor, but you're doing a whole range of work.
I think I'm, in a way, confined by, but hugely blessed by the shape of my body. That I'm very tall and I have a certain kind of physical presence. I mean, my range doesn't go to playing QCs, because stereotypically QCs are smaller men.
Yes.
That's not quite true, but so my range doesn't go there. But I think it's to do with that, really, and whatever comes with that.
Yeah.
And I would have thought that's a combination of being able to play soft and gentle, because I am, and also to be intimidating, or a warrior, or an old warrior, or people who die frequently in the things I'm doing. I was joking with somebody about the role I just played, which we come across a raddled old Russian sailor. Okay? Now, it used to be that the tagline on the characters he came with, surprisingly athletic middle-aged man strides through the door.
Yes.
Well, that's gone, and now we're into something else now.
Oh, brilliant. And you started out, I'm seeing here, in theatre with Dario Fo's Accidental Death of an Anarchist.
Well, that was a bit further on. I started in theatre and education. I worked in schools and youth clubs and community centres in a number of places in Bolton. I started there in a theatre which was the result of 5 guys in a year above me at Teacher Training College writing a thesis about the possibility of designing and opening a repertory theatre in a provincial town.
Yeah.
They did the design and everything else, and 18 months later, because one of the guys' dad was the executive of Bolton in Lancashire, the Octagon Theatre was built. It was that quick.
Yeah.
That was how things could happen in those days. And I, being a year below, went up and became part of the extended company, a theatre and education company, which went out into schools and clubs and pubs and all that sort of thing. And I also worked with the Monstrous Regiment. And then, I suppose, I worked Liverpool Playhouse, the Duke's Playhouse, Lancaster, the Royal Shakespeare Company. The major theatre stuff, you're right, was started in the West End with Dario Fo's play, Accidental Death of an Anarchist.
And have you had much chance to do live theatre in recent years?
The last piece of theatre I did was a one-man show 9 years ago at the Edinburgh Festival.
Yeah.
And before that, working with Max Stafford Clark's company on a David Hare play about the railways, which was great. And the reason for that is that I have 4 children, and actually sustaining a life as an actor and paying for 4 children requires that you work in well-paid work, and it makes much more sense to stay away from theatre.
Right. And is your work now mainly TV series? I
think one of the we were talking about this yesterday. Somebody asked at the Q&A with the other Game of Thrones actor here. Has it changed your life? It hasn't changed my life being in Game of Thrones, but it's very clear that the fact that I and a number of British character actors as a result of being associated with that, and the Americans being able to see your work. I've done an awful lot of work for Amazon, HBO, Netflix particularly. The Dracula thing was a BBC Netflix co-production, and I'm about to go on to another Netflix thing in about a month's time. And I think it's because they have confidence, whereas I think before Game of Thrones, I might very well have worked for the Americans. Yeah. Indeed, I did with 13th Warrior, but and that you now have a different place in the pecking order.
Yeah.
We're not talking about leading roles here, by the way. We're talking about supporting character parts, but it's been quite surprising how much I've done. I even worked on a Netflix production. You may be aware that Netflix invests something like $8 billion a year in production around the world, and they're going to countries all over the world and giving them money to produce in their own language. And I played an American CIA guy, the only English-speaking person in the cast, in a Polish production, which was a very dystopian, brilliant piece of work. And they go to somewhere like Poland because it's got such a great film history. Yes. That technically, the actors were terrific, and the director, a lot of whom were working in the West.
Oh, brilliant. And where next? What are your sort of next projects?
Well, I'm going to work on a Netflix. I would describe it as Snow White meets Game of Thrones kind of fantasy thing. It's the heroine is a young woman, and I'm playing a character called Tusk, who I can only describe. He speaks in his own language, which you may be aware that Dothraki, which was there were a couple of languages in Game of Thrones which were invented, and they actually invented a language. They've done that here. It's very difficult. I had 6 or 12 lines for the audition. I spent hours trying to learn it. It was very difficult. You're simply learning phonetically. Anyway, I'm playing this character called Tusk, and he has some kind of prosthetic, which may indeed be a rhinoceros tusk. I don't know. They're going to do so I'm doing that. Then I'm going back to. I was in the last series of Doc Martin, playing a very ill publican, and I'm going back, and the ill publican dies. It's getting used to it. There's something strange about dying I remember dying or being murdered in a thing about 30 years ago, and my children in the drama were around the coffin. So when they were shooting on them, I could watch them, and it struck me then that 40 years from now, 30 years from now, tomorrow, my children will be standing around my coffin. When you're doing it now, when I'm 73 now, so it's a lot closer, and you wonder if you're tempting the gods, by even pretending to be dead. Anyway, I'm doing that, and after that, I'm doing a comedy series with Lee Mack, in which I play his gay dad. So it's quite a range. It is. Although he's very unkempt gay dad, but it's fantastic fun to do.
How many times have you been killed in your series over the years?
Oh, God. An awful lot. And Holby City, I think I've died as a couple of different characters with horrific medical conditions, and then died in excruciating pain at least 3 times. I don't think I ever died in the bill. I think I did the bill 5 times over 20 years. It's effectively playing the same character.
Oh, priceless. Right. Clive Russell, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
That's super. I'm now speaking to Chris Rankin. I suppose we've got to mention the Harry Potter.
I suppose we do, yeah. I mean, it's been a big part of my life for nearly 19 years. Scarily, nearly 19 years now. Yeah.
Because when you first auditioned to it, you must have been, 16, 17?
I was 16, yeah. I was in the middle of doing my GCSEs at school in East Dereham, where I grew up. So I'm a Norfolk boy at heart. And yeah, there was an article on BBC Newsround about it, and you just had to write into an address and essentially write a letter saying, I would like to play this character, XYZ, because ... Yeah. And a few of us, I was involved with the local youth theatre, Dereham Operatic Society at the time, so a few of us had seen the thing, and obviously a lot of kids at that time were huge Harry Potter fans. And a lot of kids in the company were writing in to say, I'd like to play Hermione Granger, or I'd like to play Harry Potter. And I thought, well, I'm a bit too old for I was 16 and they're supposed to be 10, 11-year-olds. And I thought, I'm 16, I'm ginger, and I'm a school prefect. And there's only one character in the books that's a 16-year-old ginger school prefect, and that's Percy. And quite honestly, he's not the nicest character in the world. Probably nobody else is going to want him. I'll go with that one. And I was really lucky that I was either in the right place in the pile of letters, or literally nobody else wanted the part. I don't know which.
I was going to ask you that. Did you actually go for that?
I did.
Part as opposed to...
I was quite a calculating 16-year-old. I worked out the option. I worked out the odds of getting one of the main parts, and decided that wasn't likely. So I'd go for one that was less popular.
Yeah. And did you have any indication then that it was going to be a successful franchise? I mean, obviously, with the books, it was had a fair chance, but it could have crashed and burned like some other...
Like some others very much have. I don't know. I mean, the fourth book had just come out when we started filming. So I think we knew that Harry Potter was a big deal. And it was a huge deal. This was in the days when people were queuing outside Waterstones at 12 o'clock at night to get copies and then reading solidly. But I think because, certainly I was quite naive. I'd obviously never worked in a film production before. I'd never worked before. This was my first paid job. And I had no idea kind of how films worked. Warner Brothers and Chris Columbus, who directed the first two films, were also very conscious of the fact that we were children and new to this, and kind of underplayed it, I think, to some extent. They kind of kept it very relaxed, very no pressure. So I think the first time we kind of got an inkling of how ridiculously huge this was when we stepped out of cars at the premiere for the first film, and there were 20,000 people in Leicester Square screaming. But yeah, no, I don't think we realised certainly on the first film. I don't think we realised how huge it was. And when you suddenly look back at it and go, well, actually, the signs rule that this is a film production that has 2,000 people working on it every day. This is there are scenes with 700 extras in them. That's not normal, really. This is something big. Yeah.
And the other sort of intriguing element is you play the same character, but you were aging as the character was aging in the books.
Yes.
As opposed to you were the same character and the character remains static.
Yeah, no, I think we were aging slightly faster than the characters. Obviously, because it takes us a year to film, and then there's maybe 18 months between starting and the film coming out. So, and the very strange thing with it was because Joe was still writing the books as we were filming. None of us knew at what point we were going to get bumped off. So we would be standing outside Waterstones at 12 o'clock at night waiting to find out if we had a job next year. So it's a very strange experience to kind of have your life in the hands of one person who knows already, because Joe Rowling is a genius, quite frankly. But yeah, it's an interesting experience to grow up and watch your character grow from awkward, gawky 16-year-old, which is exactly what I was, into, not the nicest.
Awkward 2016.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he was. Bless him. He's not the most sensible of characters. Is Percy? Bless him. He gets it all a bit wrong.
Brilliant. I noticed on your Twitter feed, I think, you describe yourself as a collector of stuff.
Yes.
Explain.
That's a polite way of saying hoarder, I think.
Right.
I have a little collection of bits and bobs. I've got a lot of Harry Potter stuff, obviously, because over the years it builds up, and some of it's quite precious. I've still got all my scripts and all my call sheets and schedules and all that kind of stuff.
Your retirement plan.
Well, I hope so. But also I have a very specific. I've just started collecting typewriters. Completely by accident, not sure why.
I've got an unfeasibly large number of typewriters.
I've got 3 now, which is a small collection. But I don't know, they look pretty, I like them, don't know why. But my main collection is this thing called Spotlight Directories, which is, it's essentially the actors' yellow pages.
Yeah.
Spotlight is the casting company that, and back in the day, you would send your headshot and your resume off on a piece of paper, and they would put it in this big, thick book with all the other actors. It would have your agent's details and your picture in black and white. And they started making Spotlight directories in the, I think it's late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, it's all online.
Yeah.
But because these books are purely for the industry and are annual, they just get chucked in the bin at the end of every year.
Right, yes.
So getting hold of them is very, very difficult, but I think they're the most beautiful things. And I've got them dating back to the 30s all the way through to the 90s now. And they're just absolutely stunning because I've got ones with Fred Astaire in, I've got Maggie Smith's first headshot in a book. They're pieces of history. They're pieces of film history.
Yeah.
You know, there's some some of the things have aged not so well, I have to say. There's a character actor section at the back that's got people with prosthetic noses. There's a couple of people with black face, which, could you imagine in this day and age? But they're fascinating. They're absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
That's my main collection.
Brilliant.
God knows what it will do for my, they're just stacking up on the bookshelves, but I like them.
Yeah.
It's precious.
And what projects are you working on at the moment?
I am in the middle of everything and anything at the moment. For the last few years I've been working in TV and film production.
Yeah.
So I worked on Downton Abbey, a show called Atlantis for the BBC, a show for Fox in the States called Bastard Executioner, which was turned out to be the most expensive TV pilot ever made, which was fun, a lot of fun. And I've been away from performing more so in recent years, but I'm starting to kind of get back into it. I did pantomime for the first time again this year, for the first time in about 10 or 11 years, and realised how much I missed being on stage. So I'm doing more stage stuff. I directed my first short film for the BBC last year. I'm doing some producing stuff. I'm doing a lot of writing.
Has that come out yet?
It was on BBC Wales last September. And it will be, I don't know, it might do the rounds again. I'm hoping to get it out and about a bit more. I've started a YouTube channel this year, doing little silly bits and bobs and a few kind of sort of mini documentary things and all sorts. Jack of all trades and loving it.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I like to spice it up and keep a bit of variety going.
Excellent. Right. Well, thank you very much indeed for your time.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, now I'm now talking to Ross Mullan. Now, Ross, you are currently, it's fair to say, best known for the role as the White Walker in the Game of Thrones, which obviously has just finished.
Yeah.
But you've got, you describe yourself as an actor and a creature performer.
Yeah.
And you've also played some fairly other iconic roles over the years.
Yes, I have. Worked on Doctor Who as well, as I spent many years on kids' TV in a show called Bear Behaving Badly and the Numberjacks, which still air on CBBC. And I did a little stint on Sharknado 5, Global Swarming, which is a B-list kind of horror phenomenon, and Clash of the Titans as well, the remake with Sam Worthington. Yeah.
And you're also the voice of Nev the Bear?
Yes, I am, from Bear Behaving Badly. Groovy, love you, it's me. Yeah, I did that for 6 years. That was my first kind of break in television, really. I had trained as a Muppeteer in the early 90s with the Muppets, with Kevin Clash, who plays Elmo. And then I never really pursued puppeteering much after that until around 2006, when my agent discovered I had that skill and there was a role going on BBC for puppeteer to puppeteer Nev the Bear on a show called Smile, which then got its spin-off to Bear Behaving Badly. Yeah.
And with the... I was looking through the files and there's an interview with you where you're saying once you've done prosthetics and it's nearly killed you, then everybody thinks you're up for it. I mean, can you explain a bit more about that?
Well, I think all prosthetic jobs prove to have their challenges, and your first prosthetic job is like a baptism of fire. So my first prosthetic job was Clash of the Titans. I was playing a very overweight witch. So I was wearing 40 pounds of prosthetics. I couldn't see. I could only breathe through my mouth. All of my senses, my hands, my feet, every part of my body was covered. So you spend about 5 hours in makeup and then a 12-hour shoot day and 2 hours out of makeup. We were working with real fire, real steam. We overheated on set. We had to be cut out of our suits. I vowed I would never do a job like it again. But the same makeup team who did Clash of the Titans did the Whitewalker on Game of Thrones. So when they phoned me, they offered me, really, Game of Thrones, I suppose, as a way of an apology, because they said it won't be as hard as Clash. But, you know, once you do get known for playing monsters and an ability to sort of sit in a chair for 5 hours and then do the work for 12 hours, because some people fall at that hurdle, you know, and not able to do it or never want to do it again, they do tend to call you back again and again, yeah.
With the White Walker, is that is makeup as opposed to green screen?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's beautiful artwork. Obviously, you can't see it because this is radio, but I have on my desk here 2 screen tests, so you can see for yourself that the only thing that's really CGI'd on is the eyes afterwards, and maybe a little bit of treatment to the screen so it has a bluish hue and a bit of steam coming off it. But it is, in fact, 5 hours of long and tedious and great art work done by the makeup team, who are really the stars of that character, really. I merely am the canvas. Yeah.
And is it right you also had to learn to ride a horse?
Yes, I did. When I went for my audition, they really wanted me to be able to ride a horse, but I'm not the type of actor who would lie at an audition. I was 44 at the time, and I thought the last thing I want to do is break my back or my neck. So I just kept saying, no, I've never really ridden a horse, never been on a horse. There was a lot of buzz, hush talk for a minute, a little chit chat, and then they said, would you be interested in taking lessons? And I said, well, I'm not afraid of them. My father's grew up on a farm in Northern Ireland, so I had spent quite a fair bit of time around very large animals. I'm not afraid of them. So I was up for it, you know, and they are very beautiful and magnificent beasts. So I felt very honored that I got that beautiful, you know, ability to learn a new skill at that age, you know.
How did the horse react when you got on in the full? Because we've kept horses as well, and we know that they're quite, you know, people say they're basically brain of a squirrel, and they're quite scared of things. You'd have been, presumably, the makeup would have had some kind of aroma to it.
Yeah, that is a good question, because you know, I spent quite a bit of time with the same horse over and over again. But then when we get onto set, the horse that I would be riding would not necessarily be the horse that I was being trained with, because the horse that I worked with on Game of Thrones, Prince, his name is a stallion, and he's very sought after. He's a beautiful, beautiful horse. So he's used in a lot of films, not just Game of Thrones, but Dracula, Les Miserables, Devil's Horseman. Take him out, he's constantly working. But I'd had a little bit of time.
Sounds like he's got a better career than some actors.
Oh, he definitely does. Yeah, he's more sought after than I am, for sure. But I'd had time riding him a few times, but when you first get out with him, yes, you have to spend a bit of time as the White Walker, sort of petting him and stroking him and talking to him and getting him to recognize me again. That wasn't so bad. He kind of got around the makeup. The sword that I used, though, this giant sort of perspex kind of plastic thing, spooked him. Mostly because, you know, it would pass his vision when I was on his back. So it would be something that would come down, you know, by his eye, that if you look at it, it's kind of almost invisible, but a little bit visible. So it spooked him the first time he saw that. So he kind of bolted a little bit. But, you know, they're very, very good horses. The Devil's Horsemen work with really amazing stunt horses, so very little kind of gets them frayed, you know.
And just looking at the pictures, what's the character there?
This one here? Or
No,
this one?
that one.
Ah, this is the Teller from Doctor Who.
Right.
An episode called Time Heist. It was Peter Capaldi was the Doctor, and Keely Hawes was my boss.
Right.
Who's now known for Bodyguard and Line of Duty. I think she'd just come off filming Line of Duty when she shot that role. Both of those people were amazing to work with. Peter Capaldi and Keely were really, really wonderful people to be on set with. They're very hilarious. A lot of fun. Yeah, he's a great character. He seems really scary and evil, but actually at the very end, he's being kept prisoner by Keely Hawes, this horrible character, and the Doctor frees him at the end of that episode, which is quite beautiful.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks.
And that's it. We're almost out of time again. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I hope you've enjoyed the show. And before we go, we're just squeezing in one final item, and it's got a cryptozoology flavour. It's all about a Dr. Darren Naish, who during the recent Cheltenham Science Festival said, having studied the likes of the Sasquatch or Bigfoot, Yeti and Loch Ness monsters for the best part of 20 years, he's come to the conclusion they don't exist. He says the reason he's come to this opinion is because everybody now carries a phone camera, and before they had phone cameras, they had digital cameras, and he's just saying he thinks it's highly implausible. Well, these are his words. You'd think by now, with everybody having a really good camera, that there would be better photos. The only thing you ever see are terribly low-resolution little blobs in the distance. If you saw that anywhere else in the world, you wouldn't give it a second thought. He goes on to say, he's with Southampton University, by the way. He goes on to say that I'm always open to new evidence. Someone could kill Bigfoot or Nessie tomorrow, and everything I say would be wrong. Well, if they were killed, then they wouldn't exist, I'm guessing. But anyway, his point is that after all these investigations, there simply are no photos. He thinks it's very suspicious that we don't have any pictures. He goes on to say that most of the photographs of Bigfoot or Sasquatch are widely believed to be hoaxes, either done with Photoshop or men in gorilla outfits, while the most famous picture of Nessie, taken supposedly by the surgeon Robert Wilson in 1934, has been revealed as a fake made with a toy submarine bought from Woolworths. So there you have it. World-famous cryptozoologist has come to the conclusion that if these creatures really existed, we'd have spotted them and someone would have some decent pictures on their cameras of them by now. Interesting prospect. Interesting thought. Well, as I say, that's it for me. Please join us again next time. Hope you've enjoyed the show. And until then, stay well, stay weird. Good night.
Black Shuck, the demon dog of East Anglia, is baying at the moon, which means it's time for us to go. You've been listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic and folklore. You can keep in touch with us online at www.weirdtalesradio.com, by email to weirdtales@icloud.com, and on Twitter @urbanfantasist. Join us again next week for another edition of the Weird Tales radio show. Good night.
This podcast is a part of Straight Up Strange Productions. Discover more shows like this one at straightupstrange.com.